Hey guys, Jack Spirko here with another episode of Miyagi Mornings, and today we are going to talk about growing food wherever you are. What kind of prompted this is two things. One, I did a show, an interview yesterday where I was on somebody else's show. I was on Sal Mayweather's show called The Agorist, and we talked about food production in various different ways. And I had a co-guest named Curtis Stone, who is known as the Urban Farmer. He's a pretty amazing guy. But he's recently made a big shift from urban farming to really going rural. He's building an off-grid homestead. It's badass. And Curtis and I agree on a shitload of things. However, what I realized during that interview is how far to the gloom and doom side Curtis has gone. And I have been the one screaming, get out, get out, get out, get out of the cities. But Curtis was kind of pushing people toward, getting out in the middle of nowhere being the only solution, that type of thing. And I didn't want to debate that. We each had a chance to say our things, so I just let it be. But I also kind of wanted to come back to my audience with an understanding of what I mean when I say get out. And what I mean when I'm talking about that, and what to do if you can't. So the other side that precipitated today's show is I've been looking for really great content that I'm worried someday may disappear from the YouTubes, and I've been duplicating it over on Odyssey. A lot of great old documentary type stuff, specifically with permaculture. And I found one featuring, it's almost an hour long, featuring Brad Lancaster. And this guy is an anarcho permaculture badass. And I don't know if he would call himself an anarchist, but when you go directly violate city laws to prove something and drag the city into doing it almost against their will, which if you watch the video, I'll have a link in the video notes here where you can go find it on my Odyssey channel. That's as anarchistic as it gets, right? I mean, that is, and he's literally transformed a neighborhood by cutting concrete curbs, digging some holes, and putting in some paths and planting a shitload of trees. I mean, completely transformed the entire neighborhood to the point where it's more secure and more safe. And what I want to try to get across to people is, if you have to do this in a Portland or whatever, then go ahead. And the good news is there's actually kind of a lot of momentum in that direction there. The bad news is somebody may throw Molotov cocktails at it and burn it down. When I tell you to get out of the cities, I'm not doing it like some people in the survival space, where I'm telling you if you don't do it one day, your whole city's going to burn. The zombies are going to come eat your guts, right? That's not the future I see. The future I see is far more dystopian, with control by the state, control of resources by the state, thereby controlling people. And I see in these major, what I call flashpoint cities, the eventuality is going to be, if you stay there, especially if you're a property holder in those places, you're going to be paying property tax through the roof on a property that's not really worth anything. And they won't care if you can't afford it. They'll just extract everything from you as long as they can, because the ultimate miners in our world are not the coal miners or the gold miners or the Bitcoin miners. It's the state. The state mines human beings. They often say it's like a tax farm, but see, farms, when they're done right, are sustainable, and you don't bring them to the edge of collapse, right? And I guess farming today has become a mining operation. So if you want to call it tax farming in that context, it's exactly what they're doing. They're mining people. They're mining their income, their productivity, and their property. That's what taxation is. It's mining human beings. It is fractional slavery. I know some of you don't want to hear that, but you tell me what else is a good definition for everything you do, own, produce, you have to give me a portion of, including your labor. If I own 100% of that, you're my slave. If I own 25% of it, what are you? 75% free? What's that make the other 25% of you? And we all know it's actually much higher than that, and levels of control. So when I say get out, I mean don't stay in these places that burn this summer because you know they're going to burn again. Don't stay in these places that have public policies that are so detrimental to human health and community that they are destroying themselves, because that is so obvious that you should be doing it already. The other thing I'm saying, though, is you probably don't want to live where, your house is here, your neighbor's house is here, your neighbor's house is here, your neighbor's house is here, and you're completely surrounded by other people. You want to get a little bit further out, and you want to get out of what I call the Beltway suburbs. And the way you know that is if you generally refer to the place you live as the big city name, even though it's not, you're probably in the Beltway suburbs. So a lot of people that would live like in my area that might live in a place like Carrollton or Farmers Branch, when somebody asks them where they're from, they just say Dallas because it's easier to explain. But if you would use that terminology with somebody even familiar with the area, then and they would, you're probably in the Beltway suburbs. So like when people ask me where I'm from, I say Fort Worth, one, because I think it's kind of good for them to not actually know where I'm from. And the other reason is because I'm from nowhere. We have a Fort Worth address, and we're nowhere near Fort Worth city limits. We're in unincorporated county area, and I think that's kind of a good strategy, right? So my address is Fort Worth, but I promise you, if you are anywhere in Fort Worth city limits, you are hell and gone from where I live. But like cities that are south of me, like White Settlement, will just say, well, I live in Fort Worth, and for all practical purposes, even though they're their own city, they do. Like, those are the places you really need to get out of. Most cities have some sort of a metroplex, and they have some sort of a loop system, bypass system of major interstate and what have you. You need to get significantly outside of there. Even if you can't, even if you're in more of a neighborhood, I want you to look what Brad Lancaster did. And I think that, because one of the things that bothered me that Curtis said yesterday in that show was, basically, if you are, like, really urban, like, at this point, don't even grow. It's not even worth it to grow food. A year ago, I would have said different, but now just don't even grow anything. I think that's bad advice, because if you're going to go anywhere eventually, you're going to learn from that experience, and it doesn't have to be expensive. He was talking about buying 2 years' worth of, stored food. If you live in a place like that, you have no place to put it. Okay? Or having a bug out plan. I think it's awesome. We've done whole shows about that and all. But in the end, what I think really people need to get across with each other is when you build strong communities like the one that Brad Lancaster built in Tucson, Arizona, which I would, by the way, not consider in general to be a flashpoint city, especially outskirts like you can tell his neighborhood is, it stabilizes things. And we need to realize that you have to understand the weaponry of your enemy so it can properly be countered. So, if the weaponry of your enemy is the restriction of resources, it is. And it is. It absolutely is. Then what you have to do is you have to create abundance for whatever community you have around you to the point where you're less dependent on that restricted resource. My concern with doing it too much into these cities and towns is that almost everything that you need to do is illegal. So you can take Brad Lancaster's approach, which is, I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it on Sunday morning when none of the city people are working. And then it's going to be so nice that it's going to be hard to tear out. But it took him years and years to develop that. To me, it makes a lot more sense to go to somewhere where you start with a given level of freedom. But this opens, if you watch that video, this opens up a whole new world of opportunity. Because it really focuses in on what I've been trying to teach you guys, which is you are never, and I said this yesterday, you are never going to grow all your own food. You are never going to be 100% self-sufficient. And if you ever pull it off, it will literally be all you do. You will work every day, half to all day, just to provide for your own needs. And you're still going to end up doing something like, well, I'm like what Curtis is doing, put all these big 50-foot long tunnels in. He's growing all these vegetables. He's not going to eat all that. And I asked him, he said, no, yeah, they're going to sell it. So they're creating an income. So you're creating a job for yourself. Fine if that's what you want. But there's a lot of people, they want as much of a regular job as they can. Maybe they want a part-time job, so they want to cut expenses. There are opportunities throughout this country where there are suburbs that have basically failed. They're outside of these city flashpoints. They just are kind of languishing. They're not horrible. They're just not great. That's what Brad started with. And if you go with a coordinated movement, I'm going to tell you right now, some of these places, if you wanted to create a, like a permaculture community or whatever, a libertarian-minded community, you'd be better off finding a city, a suburban block of reasonable-sized lots, say, quarter to a third acre lots, that's kind of like got a bunch of stuff for sale, and maybe people would be willing to sell if somebody made them an offer, and going and buying all that infrastructure, and then retooling that area. That's one method. The other method is you just go somewhere where you can do it and be left alone, set an example, and drag people with you by example. There's lots of options here. But this is where you got to get rid of the I can'tium, and you have to stop blocking your mind with excuses about what you think somebody else is saying so that it doesn't apply to you because you're uncomfortable with it, which is what a lot of you are doing when I say get land or whatever. Again, I'm okay with, you know what? A quarter acre is a huge piece of property if it's properly designed and managed. It's huge. A quarter acre of usable space. A tenth of an acre can run a market garden that provides you an income. A tenth of an acre. If you start taking the approach of expanding community, using common spaces, etc., how much do you think you really need? I encourage you really to watch this video of Brad Lancaster's efforts in Tucson today, and to start understanding this as well. I'm not telling you how to do a thing. I'm telling you ways to do a thing. And then you have to say, like, all the ways he has, there's other ways. There's combinations of two of his ideas. There's combinations of his idea and this guy's idea and this idea. And it all changes based on where I'm at, etc., what my resources are, what have you. But anywhere and everywhere that you start to build long-term, low-input systems that create abundant surplus, you're building stability into those systems. If you watch the global work that permaculturists like Jeff Lawton and Neil Spackman have done, John D. Liu, etc., when they go into these third world environments that are incredibly unstable, the first thing they do to create stability is what? They put in perennial-based systems that produce food, fibers, medicine, and other products that humans need, and they see to water and shelter. When you do that, you get dramatic stability. This country has had that provided to it artificially through the use of fossil fuels, which I don't hate fossil fuels. I'm not one of those people. But it is a reserve bank of energy that is finite. And we have pipes going to every house, right? We have a complete centralized system that distributes to everybody based on their ability to pay. Again, not all in, not horrible, but it is vulnerable because anything that attacks the supply hits everybody. When we decentralize, just like cryptocurrency, and we're harvesting our rainwater, if the water that we're using to our sink comes from the grid and it's not there, it's inconvenient, it's not a disaster. And you have to think about that over and over, and how you design as much resiliency and non-brittleness wherever you are into your system. If you want to stay in one of these cities and you want to make a go of it, God bless you. It's against my advice, but I respect you for it. But if you're going to do that and you're not going to do something like this to build stability in your neighborhood and to build community in your neighborhood, to be blunt, in the end, you will be fucked. You will, because these cities are going to cave in. But what bothered me with Curtis is this idea, and I've been listening to this shit since 2008 when I started the Survival Podcast. This idea of the golden hordes are going to come out and these people are not going to go roving the countryside and stealing shit from farms. They wouldn't know what to do with it if you dumped it in their lap. They're incapable of this action that people so fear, right? What they do is they destroy shit and they go to centralized locations to destroy shit. If you don't believe that, just look at the last 20 years. Every time that everybody flips their shit, where do they go? But the further you get out, the easier this is to do. It does not have to be the middle of Timbuktu. I'm not going to the middle of Timbuktu. I'm 25 minutes from Fort Worth. But I'm forever and a day away from their world. We can do this. And I don't have any worry about some zombie horde marching to my farm. I've got high-capacity magazines. I'll leave it at that. With that, it's been Jack Spirko with another episode of Miyagi Mornings.